All right, so ready to dive into something big. We're talking afterlife today.
Hmm.
But, and here's the twist, we're exploring it through the lens of Spiritism, not your typical fire and brimstone stuff.
Yeah, it's a whole different perspective.
Definitely. And to guide us on this journey, we're turning to Allan Kardec. He's kind of a big deal in Spiritism.
Oh, yeah, foundational.
Exactly. And his book for 1865, Heaven and Hell, that's our deep dive material. It's
Mhm.
not about spooky stories, though. It's Kardec's deep dive into what he believed happens after we die.
See, he wasn't content just talking to spirits, which he did a lot of. Kardec wanted to understand the system, like the why behind it all.
And what did he find?
Well, he argues that this traditional view we have, heaven and hell, this eternal reward or punishment thing,
Right, the classic.
it's not that simple, not even close.
So no more like, be good, get into heaven kind of deal.
Not exactly. Kardec, he proposed something different based on his communication with spirits. He suggests it's less about a specific place you end up and more about constant, evolution.
Okay, so less about the destination, more about the journey.
Exactly. Think of it less like reaching the peak of a mountain and more like you're always climbing, always learning.
That makes the stakes seem higher, doesn't it?
Definitely. Because this model, this spiritist view, what you do here in this life, it impacts the next. It's not like a hard stop. There's a continuity.
So it's all connected.
Yeah.
And that's where Spiritism gets really interesting. So even if someone wasn't, say, a saint in life, there's still hope.
Absolutely. Kardec, he was adamant about that. There's no eternal damnation. Every single spirit, no matter what their past looks like, has the potential to learn and grow, even after death.
Wow. That's a very different take than some belief systems that emphasize that final judgment, right?
Yeah.
What do you think sparked this idea of universal hope in Kardec's work?
Well, it all comes down to this idea of the afterlife being this constant learning process and this constant evolution. It ties into one of Kardec's biggest ideas, divine justice.
Okay, now we're getting to the good stuff. Break that down for us.
So it's not about a vengeful God punishing people. It's more about a system of cause and effect. But it plays out beyond just our time on Earth.
Okay, I think I get it.
Yeah.
So less about punishment and more about facing the consequences of your actions, even if those consequences don't happen until, well, you're gone.
You got it. Because even when we're trying to do good, our actions, they can have unintended consequences, So difficulties in the afterlife, they're not necessarily punishment. Think of them more like opportunities. A soul learns from those consequences and ultimately grows from that.
So it's almost like these situations are educational. They're tough, but they teach you something.
Yeah, exactly. And to explain all of this, Kardec, he doesn't just rely on theory. He uses real-life examples, accounts from spirits that he communicated with. And their experiences, they give us this really fascinating look into how this divine justice actually plays out.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting. Tell me more about these accounts. Give us a glimpse beyond the veil.
So picture this. Someone who lived their whole life obsessed with money. Like every single thing they did was about getting richer. Kardec, he actually spoke to a spirit like that. And let me tell you, it wasn't pretty.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's not like you can take it with you, right?
Exactly. In fact, it was the opposite. This spirit, he was tortured by what his greed had caused. Like all that wealth he chased after, it meant nothing. And the isolation he felt because he'd chosen possessions over people, over real connection. That was the real burden.
That's heavy. But it really shows you how this divine justice works. It's not some outside force punishing you. It's more about realizing the impact of what you did.
Right. That self-awareness, it's a huge part of how we grow in the afterlife. But let's look at a different kind of story. Kardec also talked to the spirit of a woman who lived a life full of generosity. She didn't have much in the way of material things, but she dedicated herself to helping others.
Oh, wow. Her experience had to be completely different.
Totally. She described feeling this incredible sense of peace and joy, surrounded by a depth of love she couldn't have even imagined. But here's the thing that really struck me. She wasn't content to just, rest. This spirit wanted to keep learning and helping others just from this higher spiritual level.
That's amazing. This desire to help, it goes beyond death. It really makes you think about what's truly important, what we actually carry with us after we're gone.
Right. And that idea is really central to heaven and hell. It's saying that our core motivations, our capacity for things like compassion, those things, they stick with us. But there are no guarantees. We can't just assume that because we had good intentions, that's going to equal a blissful afterlife.
So it's not just about being a good person. We also have to actively develop the qualities that lead to spiritual growth. both while we're alive and in the afterlife, I guess.
You got it. Think of it like working out a muscle. Every act of kindness, every time you try to understand someone else's perspective, it strengthens your spiritual muscle, the one that you take with you. And just like a strong body can handle more, a spiritually strong soul can handle the challenges of the afterlife.
I love that comparison. So, if we're always evolving, even after death, does it ever actually end? Is there some point where you've like graduated from growing and changing?
That's a question Kardec really struggled with in Heaven and Hell.
Yeah.
He seems to say that, yeah, our souls are on this eternal journey, always progressing, but what that looks like, that probably changes too. Like, imagine eventually you don't need a physical body and you exist as pure consciousness.
Whoa, okay, that's a lot to process. It's like we graduate from Earth school and move on to some higher level of learning. That's pretty mind-blowing if you ask me.
Definitely makes you rethink things.
It does. But even with all of this intense stuff, there's something hopeful here. Knowing death isn't the end, it's a transition into something bigger.
It absolutely is. And that brings us to this essential question that Kardec asks. Since the afterlife is all about this journey of progress, how does that knowledge, how does knowing that, how does that change how we choose to live right now in this moment?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? It really makes you think twice, knowing that what we do here, it impacts things even after we're gone. It's like looking at life on a whole different scale, you know?
It really puts things in perspective. If this whole idea of continual progression is true, why are we holding on to things that won't matter in the end, like money or grudges, especially since we might end up spending, well, eternity with those same people learning and growing together?
It's like that saying, don't sweat the small stuff, but like on a cosmic level.
Mm.
But it's not just about avoiding the negative stuff. It's almost like there's this like call to action to
Yeah.
really focus on being better people.
Exactly. Even those small acts of kindness we do, they create these ripples that extend into the afterlife. It's not about earning points for some heavenly reward. It's about becoming stronger spiritually for whatever's next.
So it's not about being good enough to get into some afterlife utopia. It's about always striving, always trying to learn. It's like we're in training for something bigger, even if we don't know what that something is.
And that's what's so amazing. Kardec, he doesn't give us all the answers about the afterlife, but he gives us these principles, these ideas to think about, like the progress we make, the compassion we show. Those are the things we take with us. And they not only impact what the afterlife will be like, but also who we become.
It's a pretty powerful message. It's not just this one life we're living. It's part of something way bigger, something that lasts.
Right. And that understanding, that's what Kardec wanted people to get from Heaven and Hell. He wanted people to really think about how they were living, to make choices that nurture not just our bodies, but our spirits too.
It's definitely a lot to take in, but so inspiring. If you're ready to kind of shift your perspective, you should check out Heaven and Hell by Allan Kardec. It's a deep dive into Spiritism, yeah, but it also makes you think about what it means to be human, to grow, to change, this incredible journey we call life and what comes after.
So until next time, keep those big questions coming and never stop learning.